as soon as you dive into everything about your heritage and about your ethnicity, to just learn about everything everyone of your ethnicity has done before you, it's just really cool to like broaden your horizons through that. You're not like anybody else. You're you for a reason, and your heritage and your culture is part of that.
From PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs
and WETA Wellbeings,
this is On Our Minds
with Matt
and Faiza,
a podcast about teenagers and mental health, because life is hard.
And we're all going through something, and hearing stories about what other teens are going through and how they're getting better, it helps. Today, we're going to be talking about racism, anxiety, and depression. If you or someone you know needs help, we have a list of resources at studentreportinglabs.org/mental health resources.
And we recommend you listen to this podcast with a friend or a trusted adult. Hi Faiza, how are you doing today?
You know, I'm doing pretty well, and I'm so glad it's summer. One of the things I'm really looking forward to this summer is going to Phoenix for the Student Reporting Lab Student Academy, which is like a week-long journalism camp. So I'm very excited, and I've already started planning with my team. We have our own team name and, our own story ideas. And other than that, I feel like I just want to get a job after I get back. So yeah. What about you, Matt? What are you doing this summer?
Right now, I don't have a lot on my plate this summer, so hopefully I'll go on vacation, but I don't know if that's going to be happening. But I agree with you. I want to get a job this summer, or if not, an internship or something. And also, I can't believe that this is actually the last episode of the season. I've been having so much fun recording that I can't believe it's the end,
Yeah, same here. And it's kind of mind-blowing how we spent actually more than half a year on this podcast, and it's coming to an end, and I'm feeling all the feelings right now. But you know what? Let's wait until the end of the episode to really dive into those feelings. Disha, our mental health correspondent, will be joining us for that.
Yeah, we have some powerful conversations to share first on the theme of race and culture and how painful discrimination can be.
First up, 4 students from outside Detroit, Michigan, at the FV Pankow Center talk about their experiences with racism, which I think takes a lot of courage.
Let's take a listen.
Personally, I've had experience with racial inequality several times, and so have my parents and other individuals in my family. I can recall back in kindergarten when a girl was putting envelopes in everybody's cubby, inviting them to her birthday party. And I was like, you forgot about me. You didn't put an envelope in my cubby. And she was like, oh, my mom said I can't invite black people. And I was like, Jesus. It was a jaw dropper. And I was so young, so I still don't understand racism to this day, why the color of someone's skin shouldn't affect, anything,
I've been with my parents and they've experienced racial inequality, and it's been pretty bad. One time we were at the bank and we walked in and it was a Caucasian man in front of us or whatever. No, he was actually behind us. Mm-hmm. And the lady, she basically took him before my dad, and my dad was there for 10 minutes in the line, and so sad. They got in this big argument in the bank and the police came and my dad had to leave.
Wow. I've dated someone opposite of my race, and it was a weird thing at first. And I had to ask him. I was like, "Do your parents know that I'm black?" It was something that I feel like I should never have to ask. But in today's society, it's sad that you actually do have to question that. Yeah.
Yeah, one time when I was I'd say 6th grade, I've had some of my friends different races, white, Italian, anything. You could come over my house. My parents do not care at all. They don't care what race you are, how big you are, how small you are. They're going to take you in as family. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of my friends saying I couldn't come over their house come to one of their parties because their parents don't support black people or something. you know, at a young age, it makes you think like, wow, it's crazy. Like, why does my race or me have anything to do with me coming to your party to hang out with you or anything?
It makes you feel guilty.
Exactly.
It's like and then they get mad when you call it out and say, oh, you just have a victim mentality, when that's not the case. You're just pointing out that, hey, you're not liking me because of the color of my skin and my ethnic background. Mm-hmm. That's very biased and prejudiced of you to do that. Like, please look at me for who I am and my personality.
And also, people make it seem like times of segregation were so long ago. And now that I think about it, like, I've literally had conversations with my Nana. She's only 70 years old, and she talks about how she was literally using different bathrooms, different, like, sinks, stuff like that. It's really, like, it was not that long ago.
I think it's really just like sad and disheartening, the fact that like there are 4 students in this conversation, and it was like they all had different stories about discrimination from their personal lives that they could just think of in the moment.
I know, right? And Matt, have you ever been discriminated against or faced bigotry? And obviously, if you're comfortable sharing, would you like to talk about it?
For me, I would say that it's interesting because I've never been discriminated against for my racial identity, but in terms of these like microaggressions, I feel like I definitely see that in terms of like my sexuality, especially in like a school environment. So like there's this thing where like people will want to have like a gay best friend, quote unquote, like that's like a common like phrase you might hear. And even though you might be like, oh well, like this person just like wants to be your friend, like what's the big deal, it does kind of put you in this box, and it puts you being a gay person as like entertainment for people compared to like just like any other person that you would normally communicate with.
That box is something that a lot of minorities feel, just in general. I know that personally, like me and Mabelen talk about this in our conversation, but you know, having that stereotype as like Asians where you're just good at math, you're just good at everything in education, it can be really disheartening when like you don't live up to those expectations.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Let's introduce now who Mabelen is. She's a high school student in Georgia who loves making films, and she's actually won a few awards for her films, including the Hope Givers Film Challenge last year.
Let's play a clip from her film titled Nothing Less, and then after that, Mabelen and I talk about our own Asian American and Pacific Islander identities.
The 20s as a decade, yes, the 2020s, not 1920s, has been a revolutionary time for social equality. Whether it be within the LGBT community, among differing social classes, between varying racial backgrounds, every movement has had its shine. But the one that's been closest to me has been the fight for respect by the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Growing up in a predominantly white and Hispanic Latino community didn't give me a lot of opportunities to connect with my own culture. My sister always called me whitewash, and I never really understood why until I got older. It was a daily occurrence. I'd go to school, someone would make your typical cat or dog joke. Another person would pipe up a comment about the way my eyes looked or the shape of my nose. I'd pass by a group of people and they'd start a string of Asian accents. Every accomplishment of mine was boiled down to, oh, it's because she's Asian. And it continues today. Even on a larger scale of hate crimes, the experience carries on. And we never got the chance to fight it, especially not with the model minority myth. But finally, albeit late, our voices are starting to be heard. Our struggles are receiving their validation. We can't stop it now. I want the future generations of Asians and Pacific Islanders to never have to experience what we went through. I want them to start proud of their heritage and not have an epiphany halfway into their life. Listen to your AAPI friends. Amplify their voices. Educate yourself and others. We can make a difference with numbers. Leave the world a better place than you found it, because everybody, including us, is deserving of nothing less than equality and respect.
Hi Mabelen, great to talk with you today. Tell me more about what compelled you to make the video.
So basically, the whole Nothing Less video was me trying to tell my own narrative because it was something that I hadn't told a lot of people And so I found like film competitions, because I'm really into film and movie making and producing and all that kind of stuff, that prompted me and allowed me to tell that story that I wanted to tell.
Talking about films, like, what do you think about the Asian representation within the film industry, or really just the entertainment industry as a whole?
Especially recently, I think Asian representation has been growing. I think there's still a lot more to grow, because even though we have like a handful of Asian celebrities that we know that have been in multiple projects recently, it feels like it's always that same group of people in every project. And currently Hollywood can just take anyone from that group, put them in a movie, and claim they had Asian representation.
I think that really brings up a great point about like Asians and really any POC being tokenized, especially in any industry, and saying like, oh, well, we have one Asian person, like, I guess that's enough, you know?
Yeah.
You also expressed that you are often called whitewashed by your sister. And how do you think stereotypes within the API community, or better known as the Asian American Pacific Islander community, negatively impact our community as a whole?
It definitely does impact people in a way that any stereotype would, and just getting diminished of your personality just because of like who you are, and just being thought of as this one thing, like an ABG, or like the one really smart kid who's always good at math.
So how has this like kind of diminishing or like boiling down your accomplishments as just an Asian, how has this impacted your mental health?
So there was a strong point, I think it was like at the end of middle school, where it really hit the hardest, because it was that transition and just the growth that like people normally go through transitioning from middle school to high school, and just adding all of my identity onto that, because I felt like I didn't know who I was, and I was just living based off of the expectations that like other students at my school had of me, of like what my parents thought of me, what my sister thought of me. And I didn't have much of a personality anymore. It was just, I got to do this for school, I got to do this for my family, and that was it. I didn't do anything for myself, like, ever. And sometimes I would look back at little videos that I would make in elementary school and just sit there and watch them and be like, where did that kid go? Because I just got so caught up in doing everything for everyone else and not being who I was. And when I did finally realize this, it was one of the biggest struggles of my life, trying to figure out what I wanted and what I liked and what I wanted to do.
Wow, I'm getting emotional hearing this, like, because I feel like this is something that is so common, especially in the Asian community, and we often don't talk about it because there's such a stigma surrounding mental health. And I'm so glad that like you pointed that out, like how those expectations and those pressures really did impact you.
I think that sometimes the first step in people's lives is to like acknowledge the presence or existence of mental health issues, because that's one of the things that prevents people from finding an outlet, is just ignoring the fact that there could be something wrong. And sometimes all it takes to take that first step is to have a conversation with one of your friends or someone that you trust and be like, am I really okay? Because sometimes you're not, and that's fine. And then you just need to work your way around it. And then like growth isn't linear. So even if you're on that journey, if you go downhill at some point, it's not the end of the road.
Yeah, I love that. Acknowledging that. Well, thank you so much. That was a great conversation. I loved everything you talked about, and I'm so happy for you finding an outlet for yourself. I'd love to watch all of your films, so like, could you like send those links to me? I'm so like, you're just so inspirational.
Thank you.
Mabelen seems really cool, and she's already on her way to being a professional filmmaker.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan.
Like, what level fan?
I'd say not quite on par with my fandom for BTS, but maybe on the level of like Rina Sawayama.
Nice. I also love Rina. I love what Mabelen said about really asking yourself, am I okay? I know a lot of young people and even adults struggle with this question, and many times this question is tied to different parts of our identity.
And the next interview we have is a great example of how we can be okay with our own identities and accept other people as well.
Yeah, earlier this year, Zion Williams, who was one of last year's hosts for On Our Minds, had a chance to interview Baratunde Thurston. He's a writer, speaker, and comedian, and has a new show on PBS called America Outdoors.
Baratunde, it's so nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too, Zion. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, no problem. So my first question for you today is as a journalist, as a student journalist, I am very interested in people's journeys and where they've been and where they're going. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey and what kind of inspired you to be an author and a speaker and a comedian and so many other things that you are?
I find it hard to keep my mouth shut. I think that's part of the journey. I grew up in the 80s in Washington, D.C. My mother had a huge influence on me. And one of the things she always taught me was to question authority. So everything I'm doing now, the writing, the podcast hosting, the TV stuff, the tech stuff, it all started when I was about your age.
So obviously you're really good at having these difficult conversations about like race and racial equality and inequality and things of that nature. So what advice do you have for young people trying to talk about those things?
I mean, the first real piece of advice is you don't have to have it all figured out. I think there's a lot of demands, a lot of pressure, and a lot of emotion caught up in this conversation. And people are expected to know it all, say all the right things, ask all the right questions. The grown-ups don't know.
That's true.
The other is you can change things. You know? And I think one of my greatest teachers is a niece of mine, one of my best friends, her daughter. She was about 6 years old. And I was sitting in their house in Boston playing a game. I was getting frustrated at the game. And she's like, Uncle Baratunde, you know, you don't have to play by the rules. If you don't like the game, you could just change the rules and play a new game. And I was like, why are you so wise, little girl? But that is also a piece of advice that a younger person gave me that I'm gonna offer in answer to your question. You can change the rules. And so if something doesn't make sense and you realize that, just because it's been that way doesn't mean it has to remain that way.
Yeah, little people are wisest
Yes,
and
they're
so smart because they don't think of things the way we think of things. They don't have all those different, elements that come with when we think of things.
And they're not as invested.
Yes.
So I think for them, change doesn't represent regret or failure. You know, if you spent 50 years or 400 years or 1,000 years invested in a system, somebody comes up and says, we're going to do it this way now, you might feel a certain type of way about that, and your ego's wrapped up in it. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your PBS America Outdoors?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that series.
I would be so excited to tell you about America Outdoors. And I got to make this show with PBS about how we live, play, and work in the outdoors. And I thought I had signed up for a sort of extreme sports or nature show. I signed up for a people show. This show I think of as America Dramatic Pause Outdoors. And so I got to interact with Americans of all different kinds in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay as they pull up the crabs that they're raising, in the mountains of Idaho, hiking with refugees, surfing in LA with more Black people than I've ever seen on surfboards at one time in my life, and with a lot of indigenous nations in their lands and seeing how they interact with the land, which is something that we're all trying to relearn. You know, even as we've discarded so much of their history and pretended they don't exist. I want us to remember that we, with all of our differences, still share common ground, literally. We share access to these beaches, to these trees that help us breathe. And that sometimes it's easier to connect when we're not actively trying to do that. So I found myself in conversation with people about whom I have a ton of opinions on social media. But when you're on their farm or their ranch or you're hanging out in the desert and you're focused on that, then other things have room to breathe and come forth in a more natural way. No pun intended, but we can more naturally connect in nature. So I want people to see each other. I want people to see this show and be like, yo, America's big. And it's wild out there and it's beautiful. And look at all these different people finding shared value in this common ground.
I think that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Zion. I look forward to seeing you continue to find yourself, and thanks for this time with me.
Wow, America Outdoors seems like an amazing show. I can't wait to check it out. Remember everyone, it premieres on July 5th.
It seems like just yesterday that we were connecting with Zion and Noah for the Passing the Mic special episode, and now we're at the end of the season.
Right, and with us here to help wrap up the season is Disha Panchal, our mental health correspondent. Hi again, Disha.
Hi, Faiza. Hi, Matt. This season has been so amazing, and I've learned so much as well. How are you both feeling as the show comes to an end?
I feel really sad actually, because I feel like it's become a part of my routine, and it's like every week we get to talk about a new topic, and we usually will be interviewing different people and gain these new perspectives, which is just really cool, and it's awesome to hear all these different people talk. And the fact that, you know, we're not going to be doing that anymore is really sad. Like, I've really enjoyed my time.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. Like, I feel like something is gonna be empty. Like, I look forward to every week a lot because of this podcast and, you know, just having that be gone, I guess. Not really gone in a way, but like just, you know, we're not going to be recording together and, you know, having those blooper fun times that we do have while we record. So just, you know, just reminiscing about all of that.
On the positive side, we've heard from students about how making stories or producing interviews for On Our Minds has been a therapeutic process for them. So for both of you, how has your mental health been affected by being part of this?
In terms of my mental health, I'd always feel like more, you know, upbeat when it's like a day where we're going to be recording and stuff like that. But I also learned a lot, and I also learned a lot of mental health tips, especially throughout all the episodes, and just trying to curb some of the negative feelings that I've learned were kind of like maladaptive in a way. Not to use a big word, but yeah, definitely.
Working with you all has definitely opened my perspective a lot more in how we can be more aware of mental health in our daily lives, different things we're going through, and how we can develop a community to support one another. I'm definitely going to miss that as well, but I look forward to continuing to see how this podcast grows and continuing to be a part of the community.
It's definitely interesting because, you know, since we're hosts, someone might think like, oh, like we know it all about mental health, but it's definitely been a learning process every single week. I know for me specifically, like the week when we talked about LGBT stuff, it's like that's something very in my comfort zone. But a lot of times we talk about other mental health topics and like we hear interviews where it's like, wow, I really never thought about this perspective. I never thought about this topic. And I think it's been really cool to hear this because I think without On Our Minds, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to like really listen to those stories and grow in terms of mental health. So I've really appreciated that. Well, Faiza, I just want to say big thanks to you for being a host with me.
And big thanks to you as well. I remember our first time meeting during like the preliminary interviews. I was super scared, but you know, I feel like both of us have grown with this podcast. And big thanks to everyone in our audience and Student Reporting Labs for providing us this opportunity, and especially youth media producer Briget Ganske.
I have to say, you both did a wonderful job hosting the show, listening to you guys speak about things you're so passionate about, and I really appreciate being able to be on this journey with you all. You both should close out this episode together.
Okay, Matt, let's do this. Be sure to listen in next season
to hear more of what's
on our minds.
Stories were produced by Sophia, Ryan, Keyon, and Blake from FV Pankow Center in Clinton Township, Michigan, with help from their awesome teacher, Michael Kaufman.
And Zion Williams, also from FV Pankow Center in Clinton Township, Michigan.
Many thanks to Baratunde Thurston and Mabelen Bonafacio for lending us their time.
This episode was produced and edited by youth media producer Kevin Truong with assistance from Briget Ganske,
executive producer Leah Klapman, and help from the rest of the Student Reporting Lab staff.
And music by Blue Dot Sessions.
Special thanks to the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations for funding Season 2 of this podcast.
One last time from us. If you or someone you know needs help, we have a list of resources at studentreportinglabs.org/mental health resources.
And tell your friends, parents, teachers, and everyone you know about this podcast. The more people who hear On Our Minds, the better.